the North Bend City Council via virtual meeting to order. It's a election day, general election day, a day I frankly wasn't sure would ever come this year. So thank you all for being here with us tonight. Will the clerk confirm the roll?
Your Honor, all council members are present.
Thank you very much.
Here.
First item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I believe we have a motion.
I'll make a motion to remove item number 5, AB 20-142 from the consent agenda.
Second.
Alan, were you the second?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll second it. I didn't hear anybody do it.
I said second, but that's okay.
Oh, okay, so it's Brendan.
Brendan. Okay. So I have a motion by Mr. Garcia, second by Mr. Elwood to remove item number 5, AB 20-142, which is a motion authorizing contract with Paramex for South Fork Avenue Extension Project from the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by the same two characters. Excuse me.
Just give it to my friend.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Consent agenda is approved. It is unanimous. And item number 5 from the consent agenda will now be item number 13 on tonight's regular agenda. Thank you very much. We have up next citizens' comments. Time for those in the public who wish to speak on an item not on tonight's agenda to comment. You can have up to 3 minutes. Please indicate in the chat box, or if you have joined by phone, *9 that you would like to speak, and we will call upon you. You'll have 3 minutes. Juan, I'm not seeing anyone. Are you?
I'm not seeing anyone.
All right, we'll assume not. Thank you very much for that. Moving on. Next, announcements, presentations, and appointments. What we have on tonight's agenda is a proclamation from the mayor's office. I will read this carefully, but this is an annual proclamation. It is one that we all need to be aware of. Proclamation, whereas major flooding from heavy rains and snow melt increases the risk to human lives, disrupts public services, and significantly damages public and private property. And whereas the city has had numerous flood events of different magnitudes. And whereas North Bend Public Works Department oversees a nationally recognized floodplain management program that helps reduce damages and the cost of flood insurance policies for local citizens. And whereas King County provides a state-of-the-art flood warning and emergency response system, providing critical flood and emergency information each time the city experiences major flooding. And whereas to reduce the risk, North Bend actively disseminates information that citizens and property owners need to prepare for the eventuality of a flood. Now, therefore, I, Rob McFarland, Mayor, do hereby proclaim November 2020 as Flood Awareness Month. Thank you very much. And please do be aware of the criticality of potential for flooding. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Item number 10, AB 20-146, a public hearing ordinance adopting the 2021 property tax levy. I'm going to ask staff to make introductory comments. Then we will open the public hearing. This public hearing is intended to stay open into the next council meeting, which we anticipate being on the 17th. And that is the only planned action tonight. Although, of course, council members are welcome to make comments or ask clarifying questions. So with that, Ms. Masco.
All right, I have a brief PowerPoint presentation that I will go ahead and try and share my screen to show the highlights of the 2021 property tax levy. So bear with me here.
Nicely done.
Okay. All right. So we'll start off with, if I can get it to change. Are you seeing the full screen or are you seeing just the slide? Oops.
I can see your full slide,
You're doing, it's right. It's showing right.
Okay, hold on.
and we currently see assessed. Now it's gone.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. All right, so now you're seeing the assessed valuation slide. Okay. All right, so as you can see, moving between 2020 and 2021, we have grown our assessed valuation again. We are now at $1.89 million or billion dollars worth of assessed valuation, which brings us a property tax levy of a little over $2 million and a levy rate of just slightly over $1.10 per 1,000 assessed valuation. Oops. And bear with me as well because I have to admit people to the meeting at the same time here.
Yep. And I'll watch for that too, Don.
Thank you. All right, and here is our new construction. Going into 2021, we had $127 million worth of new assessed valuation brought onto our tax rolls, which results in an additional 141,000 or 141,530 for property tax increase associated with our new construction. Everyone's favorite slide, how does Washington state property tax work? And our convoluted formula that we've tried to kind of encapsulate in one slide. So what you do is you start with your prior year's levy, which is $1.9 million. You can times it by the 1% statutory increase, which this year amounts to just slightly over $19,000. You add in your new construction assessed valuation, and how you come up with the amount that's added to the property tax levy is that is actually times by our current 2020 property tax rate of $1.11, and that gets us the $141,000. Administrative refunds is something that the county gives us, and it's based on any adjustments that were made in the current year as they've done reassessments or readjustments or any kind of corrections to property tax billings. And so that will give us just under $7,000 for a total levy amount of $2,075,915 for 2021. To get your levy rate, it's a mathematical calculation of your total levy, which is the 2 million, divided by your total assessed valuation, which is the just under $1.9 billion, times it by your 1,000 assessed valuation, and you come up with your $1.10 for 2020 property tax. Here is our property tax comparison slides. There's actually two of them. This shows how North Bend compares in 2020 with some of our surrounding cities. North Bend is highlighted in the green at our $1.11 current levy. You can see the average of these cities is $1.37. The highest is our neighboring city, Snoqualmie, at $2.33. And this is the city only portion of the property tax levy. It doesn't include any of the other components. So as you can see, we're kind of right middle of the pack where we are this year. This is the kind of tells the true story of if we included any of our surrounding jurisdictions' fire levies, because several of our cities levy a separate fire levy to pay for their fire services. Our fire services incorporated within our general fund, and we cover that with our regular $1.11 city property tax. So we see when you stack us up with our comparable cities now, we drop a little bit below middle of the pack, with the average going from the $1.37 that it was for regular property tax levies to $1.87. And at that point, Maple Valley jumps to the top at $2.50 per assessed 1,000 assessed valuation. So here's where your property tax dollar went this year. As you can see, North Bend got 9.6 cents out of every dollar collected in property tax. The highest collector of our property tax within our city was Snoqualmie Valley School District at a little over 36 cents, followed by the state of Washington with their 26-cent levy for public education. And then a variety of other jurisdictions, including King County, who incidentally receives more from our property tax dollar than the city of North Bend does. And this is just another more colorful way of showing the same thing, but you'll see that on this first two largest shares of the dollar, 62, almost 63% of that dollar goes for school funding. And the rest is split between City of North Bend, King County, and surrounding jurisdictions. So the other thing that occurred between 2020 and going into 2021 was the median assessed valuation of homes in North Bend. In 2020, our median assessed valuation was $549,000. And for 2021, that has jumped to $608,000. And these figures came from King County. So you can see that in 2020, if you owned a median home of $549,000 with our current levy rate of $1.11, that meant that your annual property tax payment to the city of North Bend alone was just under $612. For 2021, if your assessed valuation of your home increased to the median average of $608,000, even though our levy rate dropped to $1.10, your tax amount would increase to $669 annually. And that change is attributable to the increase in your assessed valuation. So if all things had remained the same and your home property for some reason didn't increase in value and stayed at that $549, your tax amount would have gone from $612 to $604. But the increase in the assessed valuation is what's generating that increase, which regardless is still real dollars. This last slide just shows our excess levy, which is the voter approved levy for the fire station bonds. And this year that is just a little over 9 cents per 1,000 assessed valuation. And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay. Before I open the public hearing, were there any clarifying questions? Again, we're not looking for discussion at this time, but clarifying questions from council for staff. Okay. See.
I just had one quick one.
Yep.
It looked like when I was looking at some stats from last year, looks like North Bend took less this year than we did last year. I was looking at something, I think last year in 2019, the proportion of City of North Bend on the dollar was 11.6 cents. This year, I think your figure was less than that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that again too is just depends on what our surrounding jurisdictions who also take a piece of that pie or a piece of the dollar, what their levy rates do. And of course, we don't know going into 2021 what that's going to be, which is why we show these as based on our current year, because we do have that data. But
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Anything else? Okay. Seeing none, we will open the public hearing. I have 7:16. If you wish to speak to this item, please indicate so in the chat box, or *9 if you are on the phone. Okay. Seeing none, well, as a reminder, this hearing is going to continue. And so we'll just leave the hearing open, but we'll move back to council for comments and other questions for staff. Is there anybody looking to say anything tonight, or are we deferring to next meeting? Okay, not getting anything. I am looking for a motion. I would request assuming this is what council wants, the first motion that was in the recommended actions tonight. This came out of F&A. Alan, you're the chair of that committee. Would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Motion to continue the public hearing on the ordinance setting the 2021 property tax levy until November 17th, 2020 City Council meeting.
Thank you. I have a second
Looks like
by
Mary
by
seconding.
Mary. Okay, and actually and officially now, let me just make sure, is there any comments, or shall we take the vote to move this to the next meeting?
I'd say move it to next week.
Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, this is a public hearing only on the proposed 2021-2022 biennial budget. And again, I will, this is item number 11, AB 20-147, public hearing only, proposed 21-22 biennial budget. We'll have staff deliver the report, Ms. Masco again, and then see if we have anyone from the public wishing to speak. So Dawn, you're up.
Thank you, Your Honor. You should have all received one copy shortly before midnight last night and another copy this afternoon of the preliminary 2021-2022 biennial budget. I know by now you've all had time to read and digest it, and we're just thrilled with the chance to do that. But seriously, please take the time over the course of the next week or so and look through that and let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. I know there's a lot in there to digest. This tonight is the first of two public hearings that are required by RCW 35A.34. So this is the preliminary public hearing this evening, and the final public hearing will be held on November 17th in conjunction with the first reading of the 21-22 biennial budget ordinance. So the 2021-2022 budget, if adopted as proposed, would authorize $41.1 million in expenditures in 2021 and $35.2 million of expenditures in 2022. This includes $9.3 million of general fund expenditures in 2021 and $9.8 million of general fund expenditures in 2022. Overall, the proposed 2021 budget is almost 13% higher than the 2020 year-end estimate. And this is due almost exclusively to capital projects, including phase 2 of the wastewater treatment plant, critical improvements, which is slated to begin construction in 2021 and has $14 million budgeted for that year alone. The 2021 general fund budget is slightly less than 4% higher than 2021 year-end estimate, which is primarily a reflection of several positions which were vacant for much of 2020 now being filled, including our Community and Economic Development Director position. The 2021-2022 budget is certainly influenced greatly by the continued impacts and uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. The budgets which were reduced as part of the cost-saving measures in 2020 will remain reduced for much of this biennium, with the hope that as we move closer to the second year, that things may return to a bit more normalcy. And revenues, which have always historically been budgeted extremely conservatively, continue with that trend. And even more so when it comes to those such as sales tax and other business tax revenues. These are typically budgeted based on the last full year of collections, which in this case would be 2019. But for obvious reasons, we don't want to do that because we would be budgeting a lot higher rate than what is currently contained in your 2021 and 2022 budgets, so that we remain at extremely conservative levels. And while doing so, this budget does continue to meet the general fund target of 10% reserved fund balance. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does any council member need any clarifying question at this time? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing at 7:22. If there's any member of the public wishing to speak on this item, please indicate in the chat box or by *9 if you have called into the meeting. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. As a reminder, tonight is only for the public hearing. There is no action anticipated on the budget this evening. So I won't be asking for a motion. But if anyone in the council wanted to make a comment, we would of course take that. Mr. Garcia.
I still am greatly opposed to taking money out of the capital projects and moving it to pay for salaries and moving that back over to general fund. I feel like we are chasing money for capital improvement projects, and to take this money out to me is not a good direction. I just feel like I'd like to try to find a way to work around this. You know, just the other day, we got a letter about the sidewalks in Forester Woods. I was reading something on Nextdoor about how the Sideview neighborhood might be looking to take legal action for the sidewalks in Sideview. There's streets. We promised to fix water meters, water mains, and to divert money to actually do projects to salaries. I think is a policy that I understand on the accounting side and understand that it could be common practice. I don't feel that that's the best move for the city of North Bend at this time. If we were more caught up in these capital projects, maybe that's a different story, but I don't personally feel like we are. So I would still like us to try to find a way to quote unquote fix or change that before this keeps moving down the tracks.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. I appreciate that. Mr. Godhill.
I'll go ahead and echo Chris's concerns. And even to the point where my curiosity is we're not at a point where we need to move funds around from what I understand. And it's not a case of looking for the employees right now. I would be more apt to say, you know, we're in the middle of a damn pandemic. And if we're worried about funding staff, I would rather see us go into reserves than to change this policy. And it's more for the same thing, is we have a lot more capital projects out there that need to be done than pulling that money and funding for employees at this point. And I don't think we want to lose any employees, so I'm positive we can find another way around it versus going through this proposal.
Thank you. Who else? Mr. Elwood.
Just maybe some clarification. The staff salaries that we're paying for are staff that worked on capital projects. Is that correct, Don?
Yes, that's correct.
And typically, through proper budget management, how you guys have outlined it is how most government agencies, especially in your experience, plan and budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And hearing the concern of running out of capital funds to fix sidewalks and things like that, is that a risk? You see that as a risk, as though we're not going to be able to do that by paying for salaries for work that was related specifically to capital fund work?
I think that would probably be best answered by Mr. Rigos, but we do have a healthy fund balance in our arterial and capital street funds, which is what typically would fund those sidewalk improvement programs. There is a portion of those that just does come out of the capital projects fund, typically associated with like a water main project where you're going to be tearing up the street, or sewer project where you're going to be tearing up the street and then you have to do the road repair, and typically they try and incorporate something like that into that. We've been very successful recently in leveraging grant money, but I would be happy to let Mr. Rigos weigh in on his perception of that.
And in doing so, Mark, would those sidewalk repairs and so forth, would that be actually funded out of the capital fund, or is that a different budget?
So sidewalk repairs, we about 5 years ago estimated that we had somewhere around $600,000 to $800,000 in one neighborhood alone. We've got another neighborhood that has some needed improvements too. So we can use transportation impact fees for that work. But either way, it's going to take several years minimum to work on these projects. It's not inexpensive to do the sidewalk work. So we're just gonna hit them each year. So
in your opinion, then the question, which is, by paying for these salaries that are tied to the capital fund, as they should be, are we going to run out of money to do and fund projects that we have earmarked for to come out of the capital funds? Do you see that as a risk?
Well, we'll never have enough money to do all the capital projects we want to do, right? So it's all about prioritizing which capital projects are most important to us. So that's what we do each year, is prioritize those capital projects. We'll never get them all done each year in 2 years or 3 years. We'll just knock them off as we go.
I have more questions, but I'll defer for now.
Thank you.
Go
Mary,
ahead, just keep going. You already got the floor.
Well, I saw you raise your hand, so I'm assuming it was to chime in on something on that.
Oh, wait.
Okay,
I
so
think Mary had her hand up earlier, but
okay,
Brendan,
go ahead.
go
No,
on
that's
if you-
fine. I don't want to monopolize the time.
Okay,
Chair. As a point of clarification, we hired Prateet for what was it, 15, 16 years? There was an awful lot of money that the city was using in support of them to come out and actually oversee a lot of projects that we had staff on site to be there. I was there on several projects over the past 4 years to hear the confusion from inspectors that we had at the time, and this clash, if you will, of information flow, and not always was it easy decision making. Would Mark be able to speak into that a little bit more, that very challenging relationship of why the city chose Prateet and why we ultimately did not go forward with them again? Because that was a lot of money was spent that way.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that question. So we used
Thank you.
Petit from 2014 when I arrived in June through 2019. And we had subs underneath them. So our geotechnical engineering work was done underneath Petit. Our floodplain support, all the flood elevation certificates and floodplain development permits were done under Petit. Additionally, all the TESC inspection and water main, sewer main, storm drainage work in the city was done by Petit. In 2017 or 18, we hired our first full-time public works inspector. And so that was huge. So that was really beneficial for myself, Tom Moore, Don DeBerg, to have somebody internal in-house to really watch what the contractors were doing to make sure that
Right.
their construction followed the approved engineering plans. So we all of a sudden in 2017 or 18 became a little less reliant on Petit because we had that full-time inspector. Then we lost that inspector for about 6 months, and it was a big hit to us in public works. And so we scrambled, we interviewed, and we found a new inspector, Daniel, who's been with us for about a year or so now. So he's been doing a great job. We've totally weaned ourselves off of Petit, except for some floodplain review work. And we've backfilled that with a little bit of RH2 and a little bit of mostly RH2. I think we've got a little less work coming through the pipeline, development and review work in 2020 than we have. Actually, I know we have less development and review work in 2020 than we did in 2017, 2018. We've also contracted directly with Terracon. They're our geotechnical engineer of record. So instead of having these consultants worked under Petit, now they're working directly under the city. We have contracts with them. So
Okay.
we're a little less busy in the development plan review, and then having a full-time public works inspector really helps. So
Mark-
does that
Mark,
answer your question?
Thank you,
Was it?
Mark.
Yeah.
Mark, can I ask one more question of you?
Yeah.
What do you perceive? Do we need another inspector to actually help lift us out of this crisis that we're in? Would we be valuable to have that?
We've got a water manager coming soon, so that'll really help us for our water mitigation projects and our leak reduction projects. We have a very sophisticated water system because we have two water systems. We have a domestic pipeline system and then a mitigation system. So that person will be starting in mid-November, so that will take a big load off our chest. I think we're still okay with one full-time public works inspector, Daniel, and then we're using RH2 now, a couple of their inspectors to help us out on the some of the large construction projects, the Dahlgren Shelter Holdings project and Snoqualmie Valley Athletic Association. So we just call them up. They're on call. They're out here several days a week. So that's working pretty well with RH2 and the city.
Well, thank you, Mark. I really feel it was important to bring this up so everybody's on the same page of understanding fully of what the needs are.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
just, Chris, I'm not calling you a second. I wanted to clarify one of the things Mark said about contracting directly versus running through other consultants. One of the main changes there is a 10 to 15% markup that we avoid simply for another consultant handling a bill. So not huge dollars in the scheme of things, but something we're looking for every penny. Mr. Garcia.
Well, point of clarification, the contract for the Dahlgren project and the athletic fields would be, those inspection fees would be billed directly to the developer, not to the city.
Mark.
So how that works is they bill the city for, we are charged.
It wasn't a
by
question, it was a
RH.
statement.
What?
It wasn't a question, it was a statement,
Okay.
right? That's how that works. Those people get billed by the city for those inspections. It's a pass-through
Pass through.
cost. Yeah,
That's a pass through.
not a
Yep.
cost of the city, it's a cost of the developers.
For a development project, yes.
For a development project, yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Brendan.
I'm still struggling to find, because I want to measure this risk thought that Chris put forward, because if it is a big risk, a valid risk, something that will negatively impact us, it'd be great to know that. And I'm still confused on whether or not it's a risk or not to pay for salaries that are tied to the capital fund through the capital fund. So maybe you had it in your speech, Mark, but I'm still a little bit unclear
Yeah,
as to
I don't
what
have
level
those.
of risk.
Yeah,
So-
I don't
so-
have those numbers tonight.
I mean, because what I got from you is we're kind of damned if we do, damned if we don't, because we always have so many projects. We'll never have enough money anyways, right?
We're actively seeking a lot of grants, and so that's
Mhm.
really, I mean, we've received, I think, about $4 million in transportation grants alone the last 3 years. With the downtown plaza project was $1.5 million. Park Street roundabout was $1 million, and then the roundabout out at the Outlet Mall is $1.4 million. So that totals about $4 million. Plus, we've got a lot of CDBG grant funds under Ken and under Rob Cummings. So that's probably another $500,000 or $1 million. So that type of money really dwarfs the capital improvement projects that are charged to staff. I think we're talking about $150,000, $200,000.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my
something
next
like that.
question is how much is it? And I think it's less than 200K, right?
So the key is to be really proactive on seeking these large grant applications at Puget Sound Regional Council. And I've got a pretty good staff right now set up to do that. I've been successful on several. So is Tom Moore, and now Dan Marcinko's helping us out on those as well. And even our planners are helping us on the some of the CDBG work, Jamie and Jesse and Mike. So that's what we really want to go after. And we want to have adequate staff to be able to apply for those grant applications. There are some extra strings attached with the grants that it just takes time to apply and follow up. So.
Brendan, are you done for now?
I just had one, sorry, my dog is bothering me. So the monies would then go to the general fund, correct? And so what was the amount, Dawn, the final amount that would be if we reallocate?
Yeah, between the general fund and the street fund, it would be $200,000 annually.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold for now. I got to attend to something.
So Mr. Gotthelf, then Ms. Miller.
Well, the point is, and I think Don actually answered my question, is that's $200,000 a year. So every year you're going to drain that portion of it. And my question is, why are we talking about this? You know, the reason we're talking about this is we're trying to increase our general fund, so to speak, or versus the draining the capital fund. And if we can do it currently without changing it, why are we making a policy decision based on that we've just talked about less than a month ago, okay, for something that we don't need to do right now? If this is something we want to talk further and get in the numbers and understand how it's going to deplete it and why you don't want to do this long term right now from a council perspective, we can get into that. But I mean, there's no need to make this policy change based upon our current budget. And the biggest issue I think we have tonight is making that decision so we don't hold Dawn up from completing this budget.
Thank you. Mary, did I see your hand up?
Yes, but I'm rethinking what I was going to say. So give me a couple minutes here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Heather?
Yeah,
Then-
so we're basically talking about a money shuffle. And so if we take money from something, the capital fund, to pay for salaries, then doesn't that make it easier to do that? And therefore you're not going to look at more creative ways to get around your budget issues?
Well,
Makes sense?
the creative way in the near term is to take it out of the reserves. And that's entirely possible and has been suggested.
That's if we need to.
You will be.
We'll have to take it from reserves because that kind of spooks me, but
Well, unless, the effects of the pandemic go away and our revenues are instantly restored to 2019 levels, then we'd be okay. But right now, at least in this coming biennium, you will be using reserves to keep the level of service where it's at right now.
So Don, we have to think about the next two.
Mary.
Sorry.
Chris, were you done?
No, I was going to say, I mean, I get that this is a common accounting practice. I just don't feel like that's what's best for what we need to do right now. It comes down to, are we better off having a quote unquote more common accounting practice, or are we better off spending the $200,000 a year? At least I've heard that number as high as $400,000. So, I mean, who knows what that number really looks like?
You didn't
Right.
hear that from me.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's-
I'm going to trust the finance director to know the number of the allocation. Remember, one of the things that I should remind all of you is we're talking about an allocation is very different than the practice for a private developer where it is a billable hour. Very different.
Yes, but we're still waiting to see that. So, to me, it boils down: is it better to have a pure accounting form, or is it better to spend the money on capital projects? This seems to be being driven by a one-time shortfall, and so I don't want to change a policy at this point in time because, as Mark said, we can never really catch up. I mean, we have projects that were built in the 60s and 70s that are now due. So yes, $200,000 a year doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. And if we need to do some things, if it really sounds like in the second year of the biennium budget is when we would really run into problems.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the whole first year, and if we have to come back and change this, or we have to hit the reserve in a pandemic, because if we don't need to hit the reserve in a global pandemic, what will we need to hit it for? Right? It could end, it could come back. I don't want to make a policy change to take money out of capital projects at this point in time in the history of North Bend, because that is one of the things that we hear is, hey, our infrastructure sucks. That's not our staff's fault. That's our budget shortfall. So the other thing we keep talking about is building our economic base. We have some things coming up in the very near future, which could help our tax revenue greatly. Maybe at the next meeting, we might be having a public hearing on one such thing, right? So why change a policy at this point in time to fix what's hopefully a one-time shortfall of the pandemic? And maybe that is a year, maybe it's not, but let's not change a policy for that.
Thank you. Mr. Rosen, you've been waiting a while.
Just really quick, and I think Chris touched upon it, but I just want to get it clear. Ms. Masco, for 2021, we are fine budget-wise as far as salaries. Am I correct on that?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the bottom line, not necessarily
Yes.
the components of it, but we will continue to be drawing down our ending fund balance in 2021 and into 2022.
Okay. But
Which
2021, we're okay. Am I correct on that? That we should survive this? It's 2022 that our concerns are with.
yes.
Okay. So we certainly can address it, and I think Mr.
Well,
Garcia.
and that's unless we have another shutdown here with people don't.
Absolutely. And in these days, you know what? Nothing's a given, and I agree. But I think Chris alluded to, and I wholeheartedly agree, that's what a reserve is for. I mean, a pandemic, if ever, is the time to go into your reserves, that would qualify. I don't like seeing policy changes made for one-time events. So let's hope this is a one-time event. At a time that I think we need to be putting more money to capital projects, we're looking and talking about actually reducing that. So that is why I really do have some angst. If we need to take care of salaries and make payroll, then that's what a reserve is for. I'd be comfortable with that because that's why we've been saving that money for so long for just this sort of occasion. So that's all.
Thank you. And to address both of you, I'm not at all opposed to what you're suggesting as a current biennium, and this can be revisited. Yes, I believe it is the correct policy. Yes, I believe it is. We're talking about what is typically what I'm seeing about 1% of the overall capital spendings. We're not talking, I don't see it as a draining of any capital fund. One of the other things I wanted to say, and I was going to ask for a little clarification here myself, like Chris mentioned, the sidewalks and the water meter replacement. I view those as operational maintenance issues, not as a capital. How we're accounting for those or where they're getting budgeted is something that, you know, we need to understand. I need obviously to understand a little bit better, but I wanted that to be on the table as well, that in my head, that's taking care of something that already exists. It's fixing an existing system versus something that is truly brand new. And that's the difference for me. Mr. Rosen, you still have the floor.
Really quick, Ms. Masco, would it be helpful for you to get some direction from council tonight, or is it going to be a problem if we wait to the next meeting to give you that direction?
Yes, it would be extremely helpful if there's going to be this big of a change that impacts across the board. Yes, it would be extremely helpful.
And that's exactly what I was going to share too, is that if I'm seeing the majority wanting to go a certain way, then we're going to make that adjustment. Mr. Laudenbach?
Ms. Masco, what percentage of the reserve is $200,000?
Well, hold on.
Great question.
I hadn't done that math. That's a great question.
You caught her on that one, Ross.
You did.
I wasn't trying to catch anybody.
Never tries. He's not a catch 'em.
16.4%.
It's about 9%.
I'm sorry,
It's about 9%.
9% of the
2021.
reserve?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
We lost Ross.
Yeah, well.
Apparently he didn't like
No,
that
I'm
answer.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was
Maybe like
muting
the
myself and I hit the camera.
It
I
was
can change my
perfectly timed.
answer if that will make you come back.
Okay, looking again for hands, Mr. Elwood.
Yeah, now for me, it's like I really want to understand what the risk is. I like, you know, having funds pay for what the fund should pay for. I also see the money going to the general fund, which is a benefit for our community. I also, $200,000 in the scheme of things doesn't seem like we're draining or bleeding it. And if it is a policy thing that's, you know, more of the concern here, I'm open to debating that as well, as far as maybe it's not a policy maneuver, maybe it's just we do it and we see what happens. But it just seems weird to me. And when I came on, you know, 5 years ago, and it's like going through all the budgets, like, well, this is how we do it. This is how it's always done. And part of that thinking is carried through because I just assume, okay, this is how things are done. But suddenly when I'm listening to two of the most seasoned people on our staff, Dave and Don, telling us they're scratching their head at this practice as well, and this isn't how it's typically done, and we should correct it and do it right. I mean, that speaks volumes to me. Understanding that we're not really at a big risk of risking capital improvement projects. A lot of the things that we're spinning around and talking about that we're concerned about and need to fund aren't going to come from the capital fund anyway. And it's going to go back to the general fund. The general fund, all the funds we have purview over. So we have control over the purse strings here. So I don't understand why this is turning into an issue with the policy and changing this up and making it right and moving forward, especially when we're looking at less than $200,000. I'll just leave it at that.
Every year. $200,000 every year.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but that's the rightful spend, right? You work on this project, you get paid through that fund. I mean, in my business, I have cost centers, I have all these things. This is how I have to manage my business as well. So it just doesn't make sense. And I'm still scratching my head why it ever even came that way. Because if it was being done correctly, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. And I'm really kind of hangovers from the past are one of the things that are kind of irking me on this particular situation, because there are a lot of things that have been done in the past that I don't want to repeat and I don't want to go forward. We have a new administration, we have new blood, and I want to get things new and get things right. So to me, this is but one small step towards achieving that. And I'm not hearing a really good, valid argument for why we shouldn't correct our budget and move in that direction. I just haven't, and I don't see or hear any. The risk doesn't seem to be really there. It sounds plausible, but I'm not really hearing that it's actual or factual.
Hey, Brendan, can I suggest maybe you look at some of the budgets and how we have utilized that in the past and how we've not been able to do projects because of it.
Yep. And we haven't been able to do a lot of stuff out
That's
of the
my
general fund
concern.
because
And
of it
again,
too, right? Same thing.
My concern also comes in is we're making a policy decision. I understand you don't understand it, but I would say, you know, we have several people who've been on council for a while, understand where it's going to affect and how it's going to hit. And I'm not trying to be funny. I think it's a serious discussion that has to be. And I'm not sure doing it based upon, you know, a 1 year right now in less than something that's presented to us less than a few weeks ago to do it. And in my opinion, I think it's something we push off. If you wanted to have a discussion further down the line and talk about it and understand it, then we can do it. And as a whole, if everybody understands it and we move that way, what we give up in control or what we lose, then I think it's a fair discussion. But right now, I don't think it's something we should be utilizing in our current configuration right now, the budget that we've got here.
So if I understand what you're telling me, is that because this came so sudden and fast, that's where the brakes need to be applied.
No, it's because I believe it's not the right thing to do. Number one, so be careful. What I am saying is for everybody else and you to understand, it's more than a couple of conversations. It's really looking at the accounts and how we do that. And maybe you might understand some of the concerns we have.
And if I interject, Brendan, I believe you touched on part of it, but there are some state laws that do surround that require that a service that's provided by one department be paid for at its true value by the receiving department. And so that is something that we've not necessarily been doing correctly all these years. It's certainly not anything that we've gotten in trouble for. I don't know that what we've been doing is anything wrong because we've been trying to preserve as many dollars as we can for capital projects and for improving our infrastructure. But there is some state statute that does discuss this as well. Not necessarily the full-blown cost allocation model, but at least the direct cost portion of it.
Yeah, and I would say to everyone, I appreciate Alan and I had a great conversation about this, as did Chris and I. A lot of this, in my perspective, you know, we're talking about a couple of different things here, but the primary one in regard to a policy decision is exactly that. It's philosophy. It's a policy philosophy. And so, you know, I and the professional staff are making a professional policy recommendation. And I respect that there are different opinions on that, and it is for you to ultimately make that decision. I guess, again, in trying to explain some of everything that's been said in regard to accounting or ensuring that we know what exactly paid for what is true as well. I think the other part of it I would say is that when I started studying the budget and understanding, I was looking at the transfers that we do out of the general fund into some of the specific funds, such as the road repavement fund. And again, that's something that I look at as an operational issue. We are doing that out of general fund dollars, and I think that's, you know, that makes sense. That's appropriate. It's just a transfer from the general fund into a special fund to do those things. And I view some of those other items that we do in that way. So we actually are taking money out of the general fund to take care of those projects. I fully expect that to continue, including the pavement overlay project, which you see in the budget we anticipate doing at the same funding level as we have the last few years. So I think there is that piece of it, and I appreciate that there's just in that respect there's a policy disagreement. When we talk about the current biennium and is this being driven by COVID, absolutely, it's one of the issues that came up in when we were looking at the whole slate of opportunities of things that included salary cuts for some senior staff. It's included some decisions that we would leave some positions unfilled that might otherwise want to be filled. It's how we're approaching budget negotiations. It's how we're looking at all sorts of the expenditures and the revenues that we're bringing in. And again, if you are comfortable moving forward with this proposal as a quote one-time biennium and putting off the idea that this is a policy change, I'm certainly more than happy to go that route as well. I'm not sure what you need from me or from us that recognizes the difference. I don't know what that would look like, but I'm certainly happy to entertain how that might look to you as well. So, Mr. Garcia.
I think we've heard from some of us, but not all of us.
Thank you. That would leave, I think we got one question out of Heather, a few from Mary, Ross. Anyone else? I think we've got some comments from, actually, everyone has spoken once. Is there other input? Mary?
Mayor Rob, how would that look? Just having said that statement, how could we start a discussion on that? I'd like to hear your thoughts further.
In regard to that we just look at this not as a policy change, just a one time. Well, that's kind of really my question. If those who are very concerned about this as a policy shift are open to moving forward with the budget as a one-time fix and having, you know, at some other point down the road conversation about policy or not, I'm happy to do that. I don't know what that looks like because the budget itself, the biennial budget, is built around that. Ross? And then Alan.
Well, from what I understand, and Don, you can please correct me if I'm wrong. We have a hole. We need to fill that hole. We will have that hole fully realized at the end of the next fiscal year. Is that correct? 2021? Yes.
I'm sorry, we're hearing some feedback. Can you?
The 2021 is when we realize the actual deficit. And we cannot have a budget deficit. Is that correct?
Well, we won't have a deficit. We've got reserves that we have been building up for years. I believe Jonathan was the one that mentioned that, but we have been building up the reserves, and every once in a while we go into the unreserved fund balance to pay for things like Snowmageddon or you know, the impacts of COVID, those sorts of things. We've not yet had to go into the 10% reserve, nor do I anticipate that we would need to, even by the end of 2022, without doing these transfers.
Mm-hmm.
But what you have is typically you want your operational revenues to pay for your operational expenditures, or at least, you know, your ongoing revenues to be paying for your ongoing expenditures, and try and line up more of your one-time, you know, things like unexpected snowstorms or flooding or, you know, whatever. Oops, I may have just jinxed us. You know, those things, and use your unreserved or your one-time funds for those. What this budget does that the other ones have not done is you do have a portion of your fund balance going to pay for ongoing operational expenditures, even somewhat without doing these transfers by the time you get to the year 2022.
Okay, so
Not
the
in
only thing,
2021, but in 2022.
the only thing that I can see then moving forward is if we want to have the policy discussion outside of this immediate budget process, would be to authorize the use of the, what was it, 9% of the potential reserve to backfill and move forward, and then have the discussion about the policy change later.
Yeah. It's the council's, I mean, it's the council's prerogative. What I'm asking for is just some direction so I can kind of take the budget apart and put it back together in whatever form you'd like to see it.
If that keeps everything flowing, gives us the time to make policy decisions about how how these things should be allocated going forward, it doesn't put you under the gun quite so much because we have to have this passed by when?
December
December
31st.
7th. Yeah.
December 30, or December
December
3rd,
31st.
December 31st. And
Certainly not hoping to go that far.
no, but I'm just saying that if just for the sake of discussion and for the sake of moving the budget forward, giving that authorization, and as Mr. Rosen and yourself had a conversation, there are a lot of things that we don't know. He may be there may be a vaccine and we may be up and running full gun here in 3 or 4 months. And this whole issue might be muted at that point. But for now, for the sake of moving forward with the budgeting process, giving you that authorization, but not having necessarily draw on those funds immediately, which is what you're saying, correct?
Correct.
Well, wait a minute. Let me make sure that I'm understanding what you're suggesting and Don's reaction to it. I'm looking at it in a very simplistic way, and maybe too simplistic. Right now, we're at a balanced budget, not taking the money out of reserves, but by the allocation of people working on capital projects to capital projects. If we don't make that move, if we back that assumption back out, then we take 200,000 out of reserves to fill that hole. That's
necessary. That is correct. That is what I'm suggesting. Because it doesn't sound like we have, I'm not saying that making that change in policy isn't the right thing to do. I'm just saying that given the, effectively 60-day timeline, I'm not sure that we're going to get a consensus from the council on whether to make that policy change or not. In the meantime, we have to formulate a budget. And I wanted to give Don that ability to move forward with that presumption. Should we change our minds after coming to having conversation on it? Fantastic. We can make a mid-year adjustment, right, Don?
Yes, and just to be clear, this will not, even this move that you're suggesting, that won't impact your 10% general fund reserve. That will still remain intact, and that's not what we're talking about using. So.
Okay.
Mr. Rosen.
Mr. Rosen, how are you?
I'm with Ross. So
well, you're in the mountains and he's on the beach. I'm not sure how you're pulling that off, but way to go. Miss Miller.
I love that idea, Ross.
Okay, Mr. God help. You're muted, but I think you said yes.
He gave thumbs up.
Okay. Who am I missing here? Mr. Elwood?
Mr. Garcia.
Mr. Garcia. Yeah, Mr. Elwood.
That sounds like a fine solution. Just a sidebar question. Don, dipping into the reserves, will that ever have a negative impact on our bond rating or any other things that we need to think about in that regard?
It will be looked at. Fortunately for us, our next bond rating will be focused on our utility funds and not on our general fund. So we should be fine.
So in that regard, okay. So clarification then.
If we were to go out to the bond market for a public purpose, such as like a city hall or a non-utility purpose, it could. But I don't foresee that happening on our horizon anytime soon. So.
Okay. Yeah, because our general fund would
ask for another city hall anytime soon. Okay. Have that on your mind, Mr. Garcia.
Right now.
So 2 things. Don, did I hear you say that we wouldn't actually be touching the reserve itself, but just our reserve cash?
We would not be. We've got many components of our general fund reserve.
Right. So we would be, okay.
There'll be like 4 components once the state auditor's done with me tearing all of that apart for our reserves, but we will not be going into that precious 10% reserve.
So which is what our bond rating would really be based on.
Part of it. Well, but one thing that they do look at, and if you go out to the state auditor's website, they have this financial evaluation tool, and they look at all kinds of different financial health indicators. And the city is already on we're not on a watch, but under their criteria, we would already fall into the financial watch mode for our general fund, because our cash has gone down. Now, that's not necessarily always a bad thing, because sometimes you build it up and then you spend it on something. But that is something that the bond raters have access to as well. And I wish that the state auditors didn't do it the way they did it, because they don't take into account that you may intentionally be spending your reserves down. But I mean, yeah.
Would it also be a fair statement that there's probably every other city in our state and probably further beyond that is in the same boat and making these same tough decisions, and that they might have to factor that in moving forward for the next few years? And that really we're fortunate enough to even be having this conversation because we actually have enough money in our reserve.
Yes.
To even be holding this conversation. I will say this. I feel like the city staff and administration as a whole has done a very good job presenting us with balanced budgets. And it goes all the way back to Elena Montgomery and Ross's good friend, Joan Simpson. So I feel like we've always done the right thing with the budget. I do agree that if we need to look at this and have a more in-depth conversation about making a policy change where we could actually take the time. I mean, my understanding, this hasn't gone through any committee or anything, right? It's just here, it's just in the budget, right? All of a sudden, here's this change, right? If we could find more revenues, some of the projects Mr. Miller has been moving forward, that would increase our general fund, which might be a way to actually put money back into some of these projects we want to get done. We're building a tax base, things like a marijuana retail, Bakes Marina, Puget Western projects, the athletic fields, on and on and on. Then I think there could be some more or give and take on, okay, we could do this and still continue to move the city forward. Because our big things are public safety and infrastructure, right? And people, for the most part, feel like we do a pretty good job on public safety. I don't feel that's the general consensus on our infrastructure. And that's through staff, no fault of staff. I'm not saying that the projects we do are bad. We're just behind because we don't have the money.
Thank you. Ross, I thought I saw your hand up at one point.
You know, I believe it's self-evident that the state is going to have to recalibrate its assessment of city budgets given the COVID environment. And if they don't, then some people shouldn't have voted the way they did here. Okay? This is election day. And you know, if there isn't an empathetic group at the state level to give us some consideration for what we're trying to deal with on a local level, which is the largest extent, we're on the receiving end of a bunch of policies that we don't have any control over, then something is horribly wrong. So I just say that we're doing the best that we can. Hopefully this solution that I suggested would be one that would be accepted moving forward. We can talk about the policy change in the long term and still make sure that our current budget situation is maintained, and we keep the capital projects moving forward as best possible. And just one final thing, getting emails from Dawn at midnight can cause a lot of consternation in some households. But just want to say that
the 3 a.m. ones.
Yeah, I just want to say that Dawn, your work ethic is amazing, and you are making all the deadlines and working extremely hard. And no matter what we talk about here in the context of the budget, I just want to let you know that I personally appreciate what you and your staff do. This is a heck of an effort. You You guys always win awards for doing great things with the budget. And North Bend is fortunate to have you. And thank you very much for everything you put into this.
I second that.
Thank you.
I applaud.
Perfect. And thank you to council. I think in this regard, appreciate the conversation, appreciate the tenor of the conversation around sensitive issues and when there are policy disagreements. I think we've landed in a good place. We will make that budget adjustment before it comes back to you at the next meeting. So thank you for that. I think we are ready to move on.
And just so you know, you will not be receiving another full-blown preliminary budget document, but you will receive similar to what you received in the packet for tonight with those changes included so that you can see.
Again, Don, thank you for your efforts.
All right, thank you. Item 12, AB 20-148. This also is a public hearing. Ordinance amending taxes. Is that me? I'm hearing.
Wait, where's Dave?
Dave, I think stay quiet, Dave, and please be muted. We're getting your feedback. Let me continue. This is going to be a public hearing on the ordinance amending taxes, rates, and fee schedule regarding school impact fees. I know that we have Mr. Stokes here tonight to speak to it. I believe the introduction has been punted to Mr. Reynolds, who I know is not as familiar with it. I would ask either he or ask him to just read the summary statement for us, and we'll probably turn it over to Mr. Stokes to speak to it. And we'll see if we can keep him talking on his budget as long as we did on ours. Jesse?
All right, I have a canned statement from Ms. Burrell. Tonight before you is the annual public hearing and adoption of the Snoqualmie Valley School District School Impact Fee for 2021. This fee is a pass-through. The city collects it on behalf of the district when residential permits are issued. The district provides their 2020 capital facilities plan to the city, which is the basis for establishing the fee amounts. Ryan Stokes, Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations of SVSD, I believe is in the meeting, and if so, is available to answer any questions. The school impact fee for single family shows a decrease from last year of approximately $275 and is now $10,550.22 per unit. The multi-family shows an increase of approximately $1,300 and is now $3,431.59 per unit. Cottages, 1,200 square feet or smaller, are charged the multifamily rate. The CD committee reviewed this at their October 20th meeting and recommended approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, did you want to add anything to that before we move to the public hearing? Seeing you, I don't think you're frozen. Can you hear me? Randy? There you are.
His name's Ryan.
Ryan, I'm sorry, Ryan. Thank you, Ross.
All right, I think my internet was lagging. Can you hear me?
I do. Did you want to add anything before we move to the public hearing?
No, unless any council members have any questions, happy to answer any of them.
That's the next question. Any council members have any clarifying questions? Mr. Garcia.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Ryan, you probably want to stay unmuted. You look like, there you go.
I'm going to go somewhere else in my house and see if I can get a better connection. Hang on just one sec.
Okay. Ooh, we might have lost him.
We're on a lovely home tour of Mr. Stokes' home at this moment, so please hold on. I'm sure he'll be back with us in just a moment.
We probably should have background music.
Who any of us have not walked around a house trying to find a good Wi-Fi signal? Come on.
Hey, I usually just say screw it at that point.
I believe pants are required though.
All right, Mr. Stokes is back.
That's better.
So, Mr. Garcia, you were going to ask a question.
Oh yeah, Ryan, how's it going?
Great.
Ryan, so I'm sure you're going to be shocked what I'm going to ask you, but what's it going to take for me to get some money to the elementary schools in our fine city? I know that it's probably late for this, as we discussed at the CED, but we need to do some upgrades, and I'm thinking that this money is all going to go to the high school bond. Is that a fair statement, or is there some money in the capital improvement projects to start looking at some of the improvements to North Bend and Opposite Elementary?
Yeah, so the impact fee is collected for a forward-looking 6 years of capital projects. And that impact fee then is calculated for home growth that is prospective going forward. So the current projects in the capital facilities plan that drives the current impact fee would be the high school and a 7th elementary, or capacity for a 7th elementary. And you had a similar question at the committee meeting. We last spring had started to form our facilities planning committee to start thinking about what that 7th elementary capacity may or may not look like. And we're starting to get drawings from architects as far as the opportunity or potential for expanding and renovating North Bend Elementary and Opstead to create some of that capacity. Looking at floodway issues, we spoke with some of the North Bend city staff to look at what the options might be at North Bend Elementary, because there are some floodway impacts there, or floodplain, sorry, I don't know which one that is. So we were looking at kind of all options besides just building a 7th elementary. And so that was, we were working on very preliminary stages for that. And then with the school closures and COVID closures, we've put a pause on that committee work. So that type of work, Chris, would be in a future bond initiative. And if the school board, once they land on a project for the 7th elementary school, we would every year we update the capital facilities plan, and so then the impact fees would be adjusted based on whatever those projects would outline.
So we would not be able to use impact fees for capital projects at the current schools?
We could. Unfortunately, the impact fees, it's a similar question to what you guys were all struggling with on your budget. While the perception is the impact fees are growth paying for growth, in reality, they don't pay for the full project of a renovation or enhancements at a school. So we could use impact fees, but the impact fees have to pay for capacity building projects. So it has to add capacity. So I can't use impact fee to fix the sidewalks at one of the elementary schools or give it a fresh coat of paint, because it doesn't increase the capacity of the building.
Got it. Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Mr. Gotthelf.
So, but when you guys continue to add, I guess, trailers and stuff to those facilities, is there any point where we're gonna have to build something in order to give a complete experience to everybody that, you know, some are in trailers, some are not? I mean, I'm beginning to see us overloaded, especially at North Bend Elementary trailers.
Yep, that's definitely was part of the discussion of the committee, as far as, you know, we would prefer to not have so many portable classrooms. Again, unfortunately, as a school district, we have to react to the growth once the students get there a lot of times, and that's not time to build a new facility. And so the temporary position is usually a portable. That's a lot of what the impact fees pay for, is the portable, until you could run a bond for a construction of a school. So yes, that in some of those cases, you know, there's probably a max capacity of portables, and so we kind of try to balance that as best we can.
So effectively, all the money that we're spending for growth from this is being put into trailers, not building bigger facilities. So we put a Band-Aid on it, of which we now have to go back and fix. Is that correct?
Yes, sometimes we use the impact fees because they're there and available once the houses are built. But again, if you look at collections of impact fees over the years, it doesn't fund an elementary school.
What if we were to thought forward thinking? But never mind. It just seems like we're throwing money away at putting more portables, and when it becomes time for us to, because we've got to grow, because we grow, we've basically thrown that funding away just for the portable. So,
Yeah, the challenge is if you were to do it that way and save up, you wouldn't be able to serve the kids that are there, right? You'd need 1,000 homes built to build a wing of an elementary school. And what would you do to serve those kids while you wait to build another 1,000 homes to have the impact fees pay for it? So the impact fees are not really a vehicle to build a new building, unfortunately. We're somewhat constrained by some of the laws and statutes around the impact fee ordinances.
Ms. Miller?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for being with us tonight. Has there been any discussion that you can let us be aware of surrounding potential trade schools, a trade school, one even, in the future? Is there any support for anything like that?
Can you elaborate a little bit more? I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, I mean, I think that's one thing that we don't really have here. I know Mount Si has got some trade classes going on now, but is there any potential of an actual school of some sort? I'm just throwing an idea out. I don't know if there's been any discussion surrounding that, but the construction trades, things like that, trades in general.
There has,
because there's not everybody learns the same way.
Yeah, sure. So Two Rivers School just moved over to the high school to kind of leverage a lot of those opportunities. And we've spent the last few years really focusing with the new building on our ability to offer better CTE offerings, career technical education. And we hired a career technical ed director to help work with local businesses to try to make partnerships and make sure that we're trying to teach kids and get them leaving high school with certifications or things that will allow them to go straight into a trade. We don't have a trade school in mind at this point. With the construction of the high school, we're pretty good on secondary capacity. So really the future is trying to get to the elementary capacity and addressing what some of your other council members have talked about as far as
I understand that part too.
We have over 30% of our capacity in portables. So that's a unfortunate byproduct of rapid growth. And so that's one of the values that our committee was working on as far as how do we reduce the use of portables.
Well, I feel similarly as my other council members. So thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
Ms. Colon.
Is Twin Rivers currently empty then? So can you not use it for like North Bend Elementary instead of a portable for say kindergarten or first graders?
We could if we needed it. Some challenges are from the supervision perspective. It's a little bit far and set apart. And so we don't know exactly how we're going to use it going forward. But yeah, it's currently sitting empty. It's going to be used as we're partnering with Sideview and the YMCA, and they're using it for childcare during the closure. And hopefully once we get students back in. So that's the current plans for that use. And then once we're out of COVID, and we'll be rethinking about how that might be used.
Mr. Laudenbach.
Thanks, Ryan. Hey, we had this discussion at CED, but for the benefit of the entire council and those who may be watching at home, there was a over 25% increase on multifamily assessment. Can you just give them the thumbnail sketch view of why that particular number went up the way it did?
Yeah, if it's easy, I could share my screen and show you the graphic. It might be a little bit easier to see it numerically if Don or Rob can allow me to share screen.
Don, can you give him that permission?
Yeah.
You don't want to see the family vacation photos now.
Hold on just a second.
Dawn's out stabbing our voodoo dolls all over the budget, Jane.
I have not. I had to turn my heat on. I was freezing.
Not that you know, Chris. Come on.
So there are a number of factors that go into the impact fee formula that calculates the impact fee. One of the most significant ones that impact us is called the student generation rate. So this is the number of students that come into our schools over the last 6 years from new home construction. And we use Lake Washington and Issaquah as our kind of barometer for that. We felt like they have a bit more balanced construction, and so their numbers don't sway as much. So you'll see on the top line here, single family dwelling units, the 4-year average has stayed around 7/10. So for every 10 homes, that means 7 kids are coming out of new construction within 6 years. Where we're really seeing a huge increase over the last 4 years is in the multifamily. And you can see it has increased by almost 75% over 4 years. And so that's really the driving factor. And I think that could be, I'm not the demographer or the expert on this, but I think if we just step back and think about Issaquah and Lake Washington, a lot more planned developments surrounding multifamily units instead of onesie twosies. And we're seeing some of that here in Snoqualmie and North Bend as well, as a little bit larger kind of planned units that have 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom apartments. And that brings a lot more kids with them. Some of the school districts that we've talked to where they have a multifamily with 4 or 5 bedroom homes are seeing double-digit kids coming out of those apartments because 2 families may reside inside of that. So areas like Federal Way have really been struggling. They were sharing stories of 60 kids showing up after Christmas at an elementary school that had come out of a new development that had been built. So if you look at that, this is kind of our impact fee changes over those years, but you see, again, there's a lot of different factors that go into that, but you can kind of see the single family rates staying pretty consistent because similar to that student generation rate. And you see the multifamily increasing kind of proportionally to that student generation rate. So that as was presented preliminarily or at the beginning of this, this is kind of the summary of the change of the impact fees that the school board has adopted.
Great, thank you. I just wanted that clarification out there. So in case anybody had any questions. And, certainly North Bend is going to be moving forward with several hundred multifamily units. So that was important to get out there for people to understand that we're trying to accommodate the schools and they're looking at the numbers too. So yeah, we can see a market increase in the number of students in our community.
And depending on the nature of the development, some do not collect impact fees. So I'm not sure of the status of some of the North Bend ones, but I know the multifamily going into Snoqualmie, because it's got affordable housing, doesn't collect impact fees for the schools.
We only have one such, and it's only got 8 units.
Okay.
Currently. Any other questions from council? Mr. Garcia, another question?
No, just a comment, Ryan. I'm always going to stick up for improvements for North Bend and Opposite Elementary because while I'm not a school board member or the school staff, I do feel part of our responsibility to look out for all of our citizens, including the ones that don't get to speak for themselves. And as I've told you lots of times, North Bend Elementary hasn't changed since me and the dinosaurs went there. So while I know that's not necessarily your decision, I have to ask, so I appreciate you indulging me on that. I do appreciate the cooperative spirit that we're really becoming with the school district, and I look forward to a continued positive relationship with the Snoqualmie Valley School District and the city of North Bend. So thank you.
I really appreciate that. I would echo that. Very valuable to work together. When we did put those portables at North Bend Elementary and they had to be 7 or 8 feet in the air, it significantly increased the costs. And so as we reconvene our committee to look at future improvements and future capacity projects, we'll definitely reach out to the city as far as how can we work together to partner and try to save taxpayer dollars as much as possible in some of those areas. Those costs can be prohibitive as far as looking at how to rebuild or reconstruct some of those areas. So I appreciate your partnership as well.
Thank you. Any other questions, or we're going to move to the public hearing? Seeing none, and I will open the public hearing. It is 8:30 on the dot. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak on this issue, please indicate in the chat box, or if you are called in by phone, *9. Seeing and hearing none, we will close the public hearing. Before I ask for the motion, I'll make my comment to the school district. I appreciate everything that's been said here. One of the things I certainly hear a lot about in the community is some of what council members have expressed tonight, the need for updates at North Bend Elementary, the obvious continuing pressure being put on the elementaries here in total. I'll presuppose an answer for you and say we're looking forward to hearing more about that next elementary here in our community. And in regard to portables, I just have to put it out there since I'm finally in the seat to do so. I moved here about 25 years ago. There were portables already at Opstad Elementary. My children went through portables at Opstad Elementary, are now having children of their own and teaching in the district. That's not a portable, that's a permanent. Let's build a building. I don't think I'm hearing from council. You certainly should be hearing from me. An application permit for another portable is not going to go over well in this community. That's going to be a tough conversation. That said, I am looking forward to sitting down with you and the superintendent. I know that we've traded some emails on that, Dave, you and I, to have this conversation to make sure that we're planning appropriately the infrastructure to support you in the needs. And so looking forward to those conversations getting reconvened as you're able to wrap your head around your own dancing with COVID. So thank you for that. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. Motion to approve AB 20-148, an ordinance amending the taxes, rates, and fee schedule relating to the school impact fees as a first and final reading.
Second.
Mr. Garcia beat you. I have a motion by Mr. Lombeck, second by Mr. Garcia. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, now we need to all remember that early in the evening, we pulled an item from the consent agenda, and it is now time for that. It became item number 13. And that is AB 20-142, a motion authorizing contract with parametrics for the South Fork Avenue Extension Project. Mr. Rigos.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a highly rated transportation capital project that we're familiar with. It reduces or improves the level of service at the intersection of North Bend Way and Bendigo Boulevard downtown. So going back 3 or 4 months, we took this to committee and the request was made to hold off on this contract until we had an agreed upon time extension between the city of North Bend and Nintendo. And I've, over the past 3 or 4 months, I think July 15th or July 22nd comes out when we emailed an extension request to Nintendo. And so far, there just hasn't been any action in the last 3 or 4 months. So we haven't made any progress on this capital project in the last 3 or 4 months. So we'd like to move forward with it. At the Transportation Public Works Committee meeting in late October, there was a recommendation made by the TPW committee to move this contract forward between the city and parametrics, and it's the kind of the first phase of the project. So I'd like to see it move forward, but happy to answer any questions that the mayor or council have.
And I just want to also add on to that. Remember, council, that this received a slight amendment to the agenda bill that was sent out to you earlier. So it's not the original in your packet. It's the one that was sent separately. Clarifying question, Mr. Laudenbach.
Thank you very much. Mark, did we not receive a recent communication from the individual at Nintendo that you've been hounding for months?
So let's see. Yeah, July 22nd, I sent out the extension agreement prepared by our city attorney. And every 2 weeks, I followed up with Nintendo since mid-July. And then in September-ish, Nintendo responded to me saying they were going to prepare their own extension agreement, but they never provided it to me. And then I followed up every 2 weeks with Nintendo about that, and still here we are in November and still haven't received anything yet. So today
Didn't something
I got
come today?
Whoa, yeah. Go
today
ahead.
I got a phone call or an email from Nintendo asking me to call them at 2:30. So that was the first, and I had meetings already set up then. So I haven't had a chance to talk to Nintendo in the last couple weeks. So.
Mark,
Andy?
I'd like to, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I've had an opportunity to review that communication and I'm very familiar with the legal issues surrounding the ownership of this property. And although I do have great respect for Mr. Nichols, I've dealt with him in conjunction with Nintendo real property transactions. The city's position, and although we won't discuss litigation strategy in a regular meeting, the city's position is that we do own and have control of that property. Nintendo signed a quitclaim deed, which was recorded, and that's how you transfer property. And there were conditions that would allow them to ask us to deed it back to them. We believe we've met those conditions. Nintendo does not believe we've met those conditions. But the long and the short of it is, I do believe we'll be able to work cooperatively with Nintendo. And even if we don't, the city has control of the property and it is appropriate to move forward with this contract. This project provides benefits not only as additional right-of-way, but more significantly to the floodplain and levee setbacks. So, but again, from a legal standpoint, I'm very comfortable with you moving forward with this agreement.
Thank you, Andy. Jonathan, I thought I saw your hand up. You're good. Chris?
Well, I guess, so that kind of answered my question to an extent. You know, I guess I didn't want to move forward spending money on something that was up in the air. You know, this contract is, I think, for up to $250,000. That's not nothing, especially when the status of this project is maybe unclear. But it sounds like our legal opinion is that this is pretty cut and dry and that the city does have possession of this property. I would have liked to have seen a more cooperative spirit, but it doesn't sound like they're cooperating or even responding. So,
well, yeah, I think that's a good point, Councilmember Garcia. And the city has always been a good partner with Nintendo. I mean, we've had an outstanding relationship and we anticipate it will continue. So I don't know that they haven't been cooperative. They haven't been responsive. And at the end of the day, you've received a $250,000 grant for significant project that will benefit your community and the region and the environment. And it's appropriate for you to move forward. You do own that property. If Nintendo sought to bring legal action to change that ownership, we would vigorously fight that. And at the end of the day, because this is a legitimate and important public purpose, you will prevail.
okay.
So,
Yeah, and I appreciate the amendment to the contract or to the agenda bill to make it a little bit firmer in our stance. So at this point in time, hearing that this is in our legal possession, I would feel comfortable moving forward with this and apologize to TPW for pulling this from the consent. But again, I just feel like there's question about the legality of it that's been answered and it is time to move it forward. So thank you for the indulgence, council and staff.
I just have one thing to add. Thank you, Chris. Your diligence and you sitting in for me at that meeting and making that addition was valuable and well thought out. So never apologize for doing the right thing. Mark, answer Mr. 230's appointment, and maybe we can get this whole thing put to bed right quick.
Yeah. For the administration, I'll say, Chris, also that I thought it was entirely appropriate to ask for that to be removed so we could have this conversation. It was unclear, and certainly receiving Mr. Nichols' letter this afternoon made it appear even more so until we again checked back with legal counsel. So I appreciate that. That was the right thing to do. All right. If that's the clarifying questions, then I'll once again pause to see if we have any member of the public wishing to speak on this item. If you do, please indicate in the chat box or by *9 if you're on the phone. And seeing and hearing none, we will move on. And Mr. Loudenbach, did this come through your committee? Where Mr. Rosen?
DPW. You ready? Motion to approve AB 20-142, authorizing the mayor to sign a contract with Parametrics for the South Fork Avenue Extension Transportation Capital Project in a form and content acceptable to the city attorney in an amount not to exceed $223,387.23.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I have a second by Mr. Loudenbach, motion by Mr. Rosen. I won't reread the motion, but you do get the credit for the longest motion of the evening. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries and it is unanimous. Thank you very much for that. That does end the regular agenda bills for the evening. We'll move on to mayor, council, and administrator concerns and initiatives. Let's see here. I've totally lost order, but I was writing folks down as they joined the meeting. So Alan, why don't we move to you first?
Well, thank you. The only, as you all know and probably heard in the news, we're beginning to see an increase in COVID. Just today, we got notified by Eastside Fire and Rescue that they have currently 17 employees in isolation or quarantine. The majority of them came on off-duty activities, but that just tells you that we're beginning to see it. We are also transporting more COVID-related cases through there. So that accounts for about 12% of the workforce. So please be careful out there, wear your masks, distance, do everything the CDC has asked you to. And it's really important now as we get into, thank you, Ross, as we get into flu season and everything else, that we take care of our neighbors and do the right thing. So I just want to stress that. That's all I've got for you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, in the spirit of flood awareness, I was walking my fabulous pooch today with my daughter and was explaining to her the importance of one of our neighbors taking the time to sweep and shovel all the leaves out of their storm drain. Please take care to keep the storm drains in front of your house free of debris and let that water flow. There are parts of our town that that water will pull up greatly and could pose a safety risk for drivers or kids riding their bikes, etc. So please pitch in, do your part, keep your storm drains clear. Please be safe out there. And I'd like to remind everybody that's placed campaign signs, whatever your political view is, to please pick them up as soon as possible. I'd like to see that clutter go at some point in time, maybe in our next CED meeting. I'd actually even like to talk about the number of real estate signs for housing developments that we allow in our town, and maybe look at shrinking those numbers, because I really don't think that these guys are having a hard time selling houses. As we come out of this election, I'd like everybody to remember that we're all friends, family, neighbors. No matter the results, please be kind to each other. Everything I've heard is record amounts of voters have turned out, which is a great thing for our cities, towns, states, country, to be able to represent your voice. So thank you to everybody that took the time to vote, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Ms. Miller.
Okay, just want to say very briefly, thank you to everyone who voted today. Fantastic. All ages represent, and it's necessary. And thank you to everybody. Just stay safe, wear those masks, and stay the course. And have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Loudenback.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to echo everybody's comments on the concerns about COVID and the fact that we are, despite our what may be political differences, we're all still friends. We're all still North Bend residents, and let's enjoy and respect the fact that we do live in this community. Despite Mr. Rosen being a Yankees fan, which I don't know if we can ever forgive him. And then
Go Dodgers.
And then, of course, the one thing that I think we all need to focus on at this time, particularly important, is that Miss Colin has a birthday, and it cannot go unrecognized. Miss Colin is a first line responder on the war against COVID, and it's her birthday, and I think she deserves a round of applause, if not a happy birthday song.
Happy
Let's
birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy
birthday, dear Heather.
Happy
Happy birthday to you.
Who said we need to go out for drinks? That sounded like we did.
Sorry for that.
I warned her in the beginning that the singing was not pretty.
It was awesome. I loved it.
I just changed the order. Mr. Rosen.
I just want to echo what everyone else has said tonight. Thank you to all our citizens for participating in this amazing experiment of democracy that we have in this country. And I certainly feel privileged to be here participating on a council meeting and democracy at this level. It's a great privilege, and I thank all the citizens for allowing us to do this. So, yep, and echo, regardless of the outcome, let's all just keep in mind we're all friends, we're all in one community, and we'll move forward whichever way it goes. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Elwood.
Yeah, I'll continue to echo the echoes. Thank you, Alan, for bringing up about East Side Fire and Rescue. That's a very important point. Part of the conversations that we're having in our household, I have 2 teenagers, and at what point are we supposed to start getting more comfortable and living our lives and things like that? And it's just another reminder that we're not there yet. So we still have to take those precautions and do what's right, if not for ourselves and our own family, but for other families and other people we may have to interact with. So keeping that up is good. I also hope that after this election, the sentiments that we are neighbors, we are friends holds. I'm hearing about people that are heavily arming themselves and stockpiling ammunition because they're thinking the end of the world is coming at the end of this election. And I hope what happens with the protests downtown happens again, which is not much. People express their opinions, there's no violence, and then we move on as a community together. So that's what I trust will happen here in North Bend, and that's what I just expect. So I don't think anything less than that, but if anybody's frightened or concerned, please reach out to the police department and do right by that. Taking actions into your own hand, especially armed, is probably not a good idea. But other than that, yeah, stay safe, and whichever way the wind blows, I guess we just carry on. Thank you.
Great sentiment. And Ms. Colin, since you were subjected to torture there, you get the last word.
Okay. I want to just say that COVID is on the increase. We're seeing it again. And we're getting patients from out of state, from Montana. We've been getting them from Yakima for a while, but Western Washington as a whole, as a witness, has been really good masking, social distancing. So I'm proud of us for that. I like the creative things that North Bend's been doing, like the Quarantine-O-Ween. That was a beautiful event. And I think we can keep coming up with more activities that are creative for winter, like eating outdoors, wearing our ski outfits, or I don't know. But I know that we are creative and we'll think of ways. And I'm also just want to say I'm proud of the record voter turnout. It's amazing. And I agree, whatever way the selection goes out. It's great to see everybody involved and caring and voting. It's amazing.
Thank you. I'm going to end up doubling up on some of the sentiments that have been said. I think I'll lead with a little bit to my amazement, considering my comment at the start of the meeting, but I was so focused on the meeting that until it was first mentioned by one of you here in summary comments, I forgot about the election. That was a pretty peaceful feeling, frankly. Now you've got me worried again. I got to go find out results. Echoing something that Mr. Garcia said, in response to Flood Awareness Month, be very mindful that it is the time of year when not only the rains are coming down, but the leaves are falling. And in order to assist with proper drainage, we're reminding you all the benefit of removing the leaves from the sidewalks and the roadways and the storm drains. I had the opposite experience from him. I watched a person leaf blowing his yard into the street and down to the drain, which is a surefire way to clog up the storm drain and flood your street. Next item is to expect some delays to continue. There's been a little bit on I-90 through Thursday between the SR 18 interchange and 468, that exit 34. Daily between 6 and 8, while WashDOT is closing down one lane in each direction doing some road work. Park Street Mid-Block Crossing project near William Henry Taylor Park has been completed. Project included reconstruction of curbs, gutters, sidewalk, ADA ramps, and a new pedestrian activated rectangular rapid flashing beacon for enhanced safety. If you're not familiar with that location on Park Street, it's basically a connection from William Henry Taylor Park into the Sideview Park. The project was paid for by a King County Development Block Grant and is a part of the city's effort to safely connect pedestrians to all areas of the downtown corridor. The city has temporarily reopened its Small Business and Community Rapid Relief Program, created to help local businesses and community organizations impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Grant application period will close at 5 p.m. on November 4th, so that's just tomorrow. More details about the application process is available on the news section of the city's website. And finally, as you've heard several mention, I do want to very much reemphasize the seriousness of COVID-19 impacts on our community. The city of North Bend, as well as many parts of the region, is experiencing a rise in the amount of COVID-19 cases. I want to remind everyone of the benefit of continuing social distancing measures, as well as mask wearing and hand washing. Reports that I've been getting from the state health and county health agencies are saying that new cases are much a result of people relaxing their home visit diligence versus those of us when we're in the stores, etc. Please be aware of the rapid increase here locally and the pressure that that's can put on our health and safety staff, as you heard earlier. With that, we will be entering executive session to discuss performance of a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101G. We expect this session to last approximately 30 minutes and no action will be taken following that session. And with that, I will, Mr. Garcia.
Sir, can we have a brief reset?
Okay, thank you very much. We have returned from executive session. I'll note for the minutes that Mr. Rosen had to step away when we entered executive session, so he's now no longer with us. There is no further business tonight. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Lomback, second by Mr. Elwood. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Go enjoy those returns. I appreciate your time this evening. Bye, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Good night.